The settlement was quiet under the pale moons. The air was cold, and the streets empty. Inside his small home, Yarek, a human trader, was finishing his late-night repairs on a broken heating unit. The only sounds were the soft hum of his tools and the distant whistle of the wind. Then it came 3 sharp knocks at the door. Not the kind of knock from a neighbor or friend, but urgent, desperate, trembling. Yarek froze, tool in hand, his eyes narrowing. Visitors at this hour usually meant trouble. The knocks came again, louder. Yarek moved to the door, his boots quiet on the wooden floor. He placed his hand on the latch, pausing through the thin metal door. He could hear faint breathing, almost like someone trying not to cry. When he opened it, the cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of rain and dust. A figure stood on the threshold. A woman, her skin pale with a faint greenish hue, eyes large and glassy in the dim light. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled, and she was shivering violently. Yarek's gaze dropped to the strange tattoo on her neck, an angular mark he had seen before, the kind that meant dirty heritage and local alien culture. Behind her, in the street shadows, a tall alien male was walking away without even looking back. His posture was proud, dismissive, like someone who had just thrown away garbage. The woman turned her head, watching him go, and her lips trembled before she whispered. He said, "I belong to no one now." Yarek's hand tightened on the doorframe. He had seen cruelty before, but the quiet finality in her voice felt heavier than any scream. The woman took a small step forward, but her knees buckled. He caught her instinctively. Feeling how light and fragile she was, inside his mind was already racing. Sheltering an alien like her could bring him nothing but problems. The locals had rules, unspoken but strict. And the mark she carried was a sentence in itself. Still, there was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and defiance, that made it hard for him to close the door. "Come in," he said quietly. Stepping aside, she hesitated, as if the warmth inside was too much to hope for, then crossed the threshold. Her bare feet left faint prints on the wooden floor, and she clutched the blanket he gave her like it was a lifeline. Yarek led her to the small heater in the corner. She crouched close to it, holding her hands out, the warmth making her shoulders relax just a little. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Yarek poured her a cup of hot water. Knowing she might not trust food yet, she drank in small sips, never taking her eyes off him. Through the thin walls of the house, the wind shifted. Yarek thought he heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. He moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to look. 2 alien figures were standing across the street, watching his house, their faces hidden in the shadow. He let the curtain fall back and turned to her. "You're not safe out there," he said, voice low. Her eyes flickered with something. Gratitude, maybe. Or just relief that someone wasn't throwing her out immediately. Still, she stayed silent, curling up on the small bench near the heater. Yarek returned to his workbench, pretending to keep fixing the heater part, but his thoughts kept drifting. To the woman, why had her husband abandoned her here, at his door, of all places? And why did those 2 strangers outside seem to be waiting? The hours crept by, midnight came and went. The woman's breathing slowed as she drifted into uneasy sleep. The blanket pulled tight around her. Yarek stayed awake, his eyes flicking to the door every few minutes, his hand resting on the small pulse pistol under the table. Outside, the street was silent again, but he knew this was only the beginning. Whoever she was, whatever had happened to her, trouble had already found his doorstep, and it wasn't going to leave without a fight. The heater's glow painted the room in soft orange. The alien woman sat curled on the bench, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes watching the flames as if they might vanish at any second. Yarek had seen soldiers in war zones with that same look, the stare of someone who didn't trust safety. Even when it was right in front of them, he set a small plate of bread. "And dried fruit on the table, you should eat," he said gently. She didn't move. Her fingers clutched the blanket so tightly the fabric was stretching. Yarrick sat across from her, pulling off his gloves. "What's your name?" he asked. For a moment, she just blinked at him, then said quietly, "Sira." Her voice was soft, carrying a strange accent that made each word sound careful. He nodded. "I'm Yarrick." She lowered her gaze again. He could tell she was still. Deciding whether he was a threat or not, the room was silent, except for the occasional pop of the heater. Outside, the wind scraped dry leaves across the street, a sound that made her flinch. Yarrick leaned back in his chair. He didn't want to push her, but he also knew time was not on their side. The two shadows outside earlier had disappeared, but in his gut, he felt eyes were still on them. After a long moment, Sira reached for the bread. Breaking off a small piece, like she was afraid it might be poisoned, she chewed slowly, her eyes darting to him between bites. Yarrick noticed her hands. Thin, trembling slightly. With faint scars that looked like old burns, he didn't ask. Not yet. The night deepened. Yarrick got up to check the locks on the doors and windows. He'd reinforced them years ago after a break-in, but tonight they felt weaker than ever. He thought about moving her to the back room, away from the windows, but she looked too exhausted to walk again. When he returned, she was sitting straighter. Her eyes wandering around his home, she seemed curious about the shelves filled with old tools, mechanical parts, and strange trinkets from trade runs. Her gaze lingered on a small framed photo, Yarrick with a group of humans in military uniforms, smiling in some dusty battlefield. "You fought?" she asked softly. Yarrick shrugged. "A long time ago." There was a pause. Then she murmured, "My husband fought too," but the way she said it made it sound like a curse. Yarrick didn't pry. Instead, he took the old blanket from the storage chest and placed it near the heater, making a bed on the floor for her. "You should rest," he said. Her eyes flickered with confusion. "Not your bed." He shook his head. "You need it more." Sira hesitated, then slid down from the bench and curled up on the blanket. Even lying down, she kept her back against the wall, her gaze always on the door. Yarrick went back to his workbench, but every time the wood creaked or the wind rattled the shutters, her eyes snapped open. Hours passed like that, him pretending to work, her pretending to sleep. Finally, close to dawn, Yarrick heard something outside. Not footsteps this time, but a low, scraping sound like metal dragging over stone. He went to the window and peered out carefully. There was nothing at first. Then, in the faint pre-dawn light, he saw them, two alien men at the edge of the street, pushing a small wheeled cart piled with something. They stopped in front of his house and set the cart down. One of them looked up, staring at the window, and Yarrick felt the cold prickle at the back of his neck. The men left without a word. Disappearing into the fog, Yarrick stepped outside. Cautiously, the cold biting at his skin. The cart was full of broken objects, smashed pottery, shredded cloth, bent metal scraps, and, on top, there was a small wooden sign, painted with the same angular mark that was tattooed on Sira's neck. He understood the message. It was a warning she didn't belong here, and neither did he if he kept her when he returned inside. Sira was sitting up, her eyes locked on the sign in his hands. "They know I'm here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Yarrick set the sign down and met her gaze. "Yeah, I think they do." For a moment, she looked like she might cry. But then something shifted in her expression. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing just slightly. It wasn't defiance exactly, more like the first spark of a fight that had been crushed for a long time. Yarrick noticed, and without saying anything, nodded, as if to tell her that spark was worth keeping. The rest of the morning passed in silence. Yarrick made breakfast. She ate more this time, and the light outside grew brighter. But beneath the quiet, they both knew the truth. This was only the first night. The real trouble hadn't even begun yet. The sun had barely climbed above the rooftops when the first sign of trouble appeared. Yarek was repairing a cracked water pipe outside his home, his hands steady but his mind restless. He kept thinking about the cart from last night, the broken scraps, the mark. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. Sira was inside, cleaning the small table quietly, her movements careful, every time a sound came from the street. She would freeze, her head tilting toward the door. Yarek noticed this, and it made his stomach tighten. People who lived in fear like that had usually learned the hard way never to feel safe. Around mid-morning, Yarek heard heavy footsteps coming from down the road. They weren't the casual steps of merchants or neighbors. These were slow, deliberate, and meant to be heard. He set his tools down and turned. 3 alien men approached, their tall frames blocking the light behind them. Their skin had a faint bronze tint, their eyes narrow and sharp. Each wore a dark sash across the chest, the kind clan members used to show authority. In the center walked one with a jagged scar across his cheek. He didn't bother with a greeting. "You have something of ours," the scarred man said, his voice low but carrying easily. Yarek didn't move from his spot. "She's not yours." A faint smile pulled at the alien's lips. But it wasn't friendly. "You think a human can decide what belongs to our bloodline?" he said, stepping closer from inside. Sira's voice trembled. "Yarek, don't." She appeared at the doorway, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The moment the men saw her, their expressions changed cold satisfaction. The one with the scar spoke again. "You know what she is. Human, half-blood, dirty heritage. No clan will take her. No mate will keep her. You think keeping her will bring you anything but enemies." Yarek stepped forward, his body blocking the doorway. "I'm not giving her to you," he said simply. The tallest of the 3 shifted, his hand brushing the handle of a curved blade at his waist. Sira's grip on the blanket tightened. Her breath quickening, she whispered urgently, "They will kill you if you fight them." The scarred man tilted his head, studying Yarek like he was a strange insect. Finally he said, "We'll give you time, by tonight. You will leave her outside your door. If you don't, we'll take her, and you'll wish we only came for her," without waiting for a reply. He turned and walked away, the other 2 following, their boots pounding against the dirt road. Yarek stayed at the doorway long after they were gone. His jaw was set, his mind racing. He had been in dangerous situations before. But this was different. This wasn't a fight on a battlefield. This was his home. And the enemy could come at any moment. Sira sat down on the bench, her eyes fixed on the floor. "They won't stop," she said softly. "I know," Yarek replied. "But they'll find out I'm not the kind of man who runs." She looked at him, a flicker of something like disbelief in her gaze. Her whole life, people had either abandoned her or treated her like a burden. The idea of someone choosing to stand between her and danger seemed almost unreal. The day passed slowly. Yarek kept himself busy, checking the locks, reinforcing the shutters, sharpening the old tools he had kept from his trading days. Sarah tried to help, but he could see her hands shake whenever she touched the door. Outside, the street stayed quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of calm that made you know a storm was coming. As the sun began to set, Yarek lit the lamps inside. He moved the furniture to block the windows, setting a small metal rod against the doorframe for reinforcement. Sira watched him work, her face pale, but her eyes sharper now. "You're really going to fight them, aren't you?" she asked. Yarek didn't stop moving. "I'm going to make sure they regret coming here." Night came quickly, the sky turning a deep shade of purple. The wind picked up, rattling the shutters and carrying distant voices. Yarek stood by the table, his pulse pistol laid out beside a hunting knife. Sira sat near the heater, gripping the edge of her blanket like armor. Then it began soft footsteps at first, circling the house. A quiet tap against the window shutters. Yarick's hand tightened. On the pistol, Sira's breath caught in her throat. The scarred man's voice came from the dark, smooth and mocking. "Last chance, human. Open the door and give her to us." Yarick stepped forward, his voice steady. "Come and take her if you can." There was silence. Then the sound of boots rushing toward the door. The first impact shook the frame. Sira flinched, pressing herself against the wall. Yarick braced the rod against the door. Holding it firm as another blow landed, the wood creaked, but it held. Through the cracks in the shutter, Yarick caught a glimpse of movement. More than 3 figures now. They hadn't come to talk this time. They had come to claim her. The pounding on the door had stopped. Yarick stood still, pulse pistol ready, listening for the next move. Outside, there was only the sound of the wind, but it didn't feel like they were gone. It felt like they were waiting, circling, deciding. How to strike next? Sira sat on the floor near the heater. Her knees pulled up, her eyes fixed on the door. Her breathing was uneven. Her lips pressed tightly together. She had seen this before. The pause before a worse storm. Yarick glanced at her, sensing there was more to this than she had told. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "And I need to know what I'm protecting you from." She didn't answer right away, her gaze dropping to the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Yarick crouched in front of her, his tone steady but firm. "If I don't know the truth, I can't help you." Her hands tightened on the blanket. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost ashamed. "I am not pure blood," she said. Yarick frowned. "I figured that much from the mark." She shook her head. "No. You don't understand. My mother was from a clan that ruled the southern lands, strong and proud. My father is from a race they call lowborn. When they found out, my mother was cast out. And I was born in exile." She looked up at him, her eyes glistening in our culture. "Blood is everything. It doesn't matter if you are strong, smart, or kind. If your blood is mixed, you are nothing worse than nothing. You are a stain." Yarick's jaw tightened. He had seen soldiers bleed for causes that didn't care about them. Now here was a woman whose entire life had been decided before she was even born. Sira went on, her words gaining a bitter edge. "My husband married me because his family wanted a link to my mother's old clan. But when it brought him shame instead of power, he abandoned me. He said I was dirty heritage, unworthy to even stand beside him in public." She pulled the blanket tighter. "They could have just left me, but in our world, they believe shame should be erased, so they decided to return me to the streets. It is their way of saying, you are not wanted alive or dead, only forgotten." Yarick felt a slow burn in his chest. There was a part of him that understood cruelty. War had taught him that. But this wasn't about battle or survival. This was about pride, ego, and the destruction of someone's life just because of bloodlines. "Why didn't you run farther?" he asked. She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Run where? Every clan knows my mark. Every village has someone who will spit when they see my face, and here. At your door was the first time in years someone opened it instead of closing it." Yarick stayed silent for a moment. The faint noise outside returned the creak of wood, the scrape of something on the ground. It reminded him they didn't have the luxury of long talks. But he could see that telling him this had cost her something, and, in return, he felt more certain than ever that giving her up was not an option. "You?" "No, they won't stop," she whispered. "They think I belong to no one, but if you keep me, they will think you claimed me." Yarick's lips twitched into a half smile. "Then let them think it." Before she could answer, a loud thud came from the back of the house. Yarick spun, pistol raised. Through the small back window, he saw movement, a shadow slipping out of sight. He moved quickly to block the back door. Sliding a heavy crate in front of it, Sira was on her feet now, her eyes darting between the windows. "They're testing you," she said, "looking for weakness." Yarrick nodded. "Then we'll give them nothing." They worked together in silence, pushing furniture against the weak spots, securing shutters. Yarrick handed her a short wooden staff, not much, but better than nothing. She took it without argument, her fingers curling tightly around it for the first time. He saw her shoulders straighten just slightly, as if holding a weapon reminded her she wasn't entirely helpless. When the preparations were done, they sat near the heater again. The night outside deepened, the wind carrying faint voices. Yarrick didn't try to pretend this would be over soon. And Sira didn't try to pretend she wasn't afraid. Instead, they sat in a shared silence. The firelight flickered across her face. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "In my world, when someone stands for you, it means they see you as theirs. Are you ready for that?" Yarrick met her gaze without flinching. "I've stood for people I barely knew because it was the right thing to do. Standing for you. That's not even a question." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say more. But the sound of boots crunching outside cut her off. The voices were closer now, no longer hiding, this time. When the scarred man's voice came, it was colder, human. "You had your chance," Yarrick rose, pistol in hand. Sira stood too, the staff steady in her grip. Whatever came next, there would be no more hiding. The first blow came hard against the front door. It rattled the frame, the sound echoing through the small house like a drum of war. Yarrick braced himself, pressing his shoulder against the wooden barrier. The pulse pistol was heavy in his right hand, but he knew he couldn't fire too soon. Every shot had to count. Sira stood just behind him, the short wooden staff gripped tight in her hands. Her eyes were locked on the doorway, her breathing quick but steady. The firelight flickered across her face, showing both fear and something sharper, a quiet readiness outside. Voices barked orders in a tongue Yarrick didn't fully understand, but he caught enough to know they weren't here to talk. The scarred man's voice rose above the others. Cold and sharp. "Break it. Take her. Leave the human as a warning." The second impact came. Heavier this time, the metal latch groaned under the force. Yarrick pushed back, feeling the frame shift. "Move to the side wall," he muttered too. Sira, she obeyed, crouching low, but staying where she could strike if anyone came through. The third blow shattered the latch. The door swung inward, slightly before Yarrick slammed it shut with his shoulder again. Through the gap, a clawed hand reached in, trying to grab him. He slammed the pistol grip down on it, and the hand jerked back with a hiss. The attackers regrouped outside. Yarrick knew the next rush would be stronger. He glanced at Sira. "When they come in, aim for their legs, keep them off balance." She nodded, her knuckles white around the staff. The next moment, the door burst inward. 3 figures rushed in, their bronze-tinted skin gleaming in the dim light. The first came at Yarrick with a curved blade, but Yarrick sidestepped and fired. The pulse shot hit the alien's shoulder, sending him crashing into the table. The second lunged toward Sira. She moved faster than Yarrick expected, swinging the staff. Low, it cracked hard against the attacker's shin, making him stumble before he could recover. She struck again, this time at his ribs, driving him back toward the doorway. The third alien tried to circle around. Yarrick caught him with a hard kick to the knee, then slammed him into the wall. The sound of wood splintering filled the room. Outside, more voices shouted, and shadows moved past the windows. "This isn't all of them," Yarrick muttered. Sira's eyes flicked to the back of the house. She heard it too, a faint scratching at the rear door. "They're trying to split us," she said quickly. Before Yarrick could answer, the scarred man stepped into the doorway. He didn't rush like the others. Instead, he walked in slowly, his gaze fixed on Sira. You've made your choice, human, he said. Now you will pay for it. Ziyarik leveled the pistol at him. Step back, he warned. The scarred man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't stop. Instead, he gestured with one hand. And two more attackers slipped in behind him. The fight turned into a blur. Yarrick fired. Once the pulse shot striking one in the chest, Sira swung her staff at another, knocking him sideways into the wall. But the scarred man moved like a predator, dodging the pistol barrel and forcing Yorick back toward the heater. Sira saw it and acted without thinking. She stepped between them, her staff raised. The scarred man laughed. You? You can barely stand against the wind. But when he lunged, she spun the staff with surprising skill, striking his forearm hard enough to make him drop the small blade he carried for a heartbeat. Everyone froze, even Yorick. Sira's stance was low, her eyes locked on the scarred man's. Something in her posture told Yorick this wasn't the first time she had fought. Maybe she had hidden it. Maybe she had been forced to forget it. But the skill was still there. The scarred man's smile vanished. With a growl, he stepped forward again. Yorick took the opening, slamming his shoulder into the man and driving him back toward the door. The others hesitated, unsure if they should press or retreat. Then, from outside, another voice called. Urgent. The attackers backed toward the street, pulling their wounded with them. The scarred man glared at Yorick one last time. His words a low promise. This is not over, human. Now she is yours, and you will die for it. The doorframe was cracked, the floor littered with broken wood and scorch marks. Yorick set the pistol on the table, breathing hard. Sira leaned against the wall, her grip on the staff finally loosening. You fought well, he said quietly. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. It's been a long time since anyone said that to me. Outside, the street was empty again, but Yorick knew they were still out there, watching, planning. The fight for shelter wasn't over. This was just the first battle. Morning came. With a strange silence, no shouts from the street, no heavy footsteps, no sound of neighbors moving about. It felt like the entire settlement was holding its breath. Yorick stood at the cracked doorway, scanning the road. There was no sign of the clan from last night, but he knew that didn't mean they were gone. Sira was seated at the table, quietly wrapping a strip of cloth around a small cut on her arm. From the fight, she hadn't spoken much since they drove the attackers back. Her eyes kept shifting toward the window, as if she expected the next wave to appear at any second. Yorick set a pot of water on the heater and spoke without looking at her. They'll be back, but it won't be the same as last night. They'll try something else. She nodded slowly, her voice quiet. They will send the leader. He will not come with blades first. He will come with words. And words can be worse. Yorick knew she was right. Sometimes a fight was easier than a deal, at least in a fight. You could see the danger. By midday, he saw movement at the far end of the road. 4 figures were walking toward the house. The one in front was taller, broader, and carried no weapon in his hands. He wore a long dark coat, and his bronze skin caught the sunlight like metal. Sira's breath caught. That's him. She whispered, clan leader. Yorick didn't answer. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The leader stopped a few paces away, his eyes scanning Yorick from head to toe. You fought well last night, he said calmly. Better than I expected from a human. Yorick didn't reply. The leader's mouth curved in the faintest smile. But you've made a mistake, he continued. That woman you keep inside. She is nothing. To you, she will bring trouble to us. She is a stain, yet. We can make this simple. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch. The sound of heavy coins shifted inside. Give her to us now, and take this as payment. No one will come to your door again. You can go back to your quiet life, Yorex. Eyes dropped briefly to the pouch. It was more than he made in months of trading, but his gaze returned to the leader's face without hesitation. She's not for sale, he said flatly. The leader tilted his head, studying him. You think? You can keep her safe. You think you can keep yourself safe? If you are one man, I have 20. I fought worse odds, Yarrick replied. His voice, even the leader's smile, faded. You don't understand. If you keep her, she is yours by our law and our blood. That means every enemy she has becomes your enemy. Every shame she carries becomes your shame. I'm fine with that, Yarrick said, without hesitation. The leader's eyes narrowed. You will regret this, he said softly. He stepped closer. Lowering his voice, I'm offering you a way out. Human, refuse me now, and the next time we meet, I will not talk. Yarrick didn't move. Didn't blink. Then I guess we're done talking. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then the leader stepped back, giving a small gesture to his men. They turned and began to walk away, but the leader's final words carried back over his shoulder. Tonight, the law will decide. Yarrick watched them until they were out of sight. When he stepped back inside, Sira was standing near the window. She had heard enough to know what had been said. You turned him down. She said softly, Yes, Yarrick replied, closing the door. Why? She asked, her voice trembling between gratitude and confusion. Because no one deserves to be bought and sold, he said simply. Her eyes glistened. But she quickly turned away. You've made yourself a target, she whispered. I was already a target the moment I opened the door that night, he said. She didn't answer, but her shoulders relaxed just slightly, as if some unseen weight had shifted. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. Yarrick kept busy, setting up more barricades, checking his weapons. Sira helped where she could, carrying small tools, holding boards while he nailed them into place. Every time their eyes met, there was something unspoken between them. Anne, understanding that neither would walk away now. By sunset, the air felt heavier. The street outside was empty again. The kind of emptiness that made the skin crawl. Yarrick loaded the pulse pistol and set it on the table. Sira sat nearby, her staff leaning against her chair. No one spoke, but both of them were listening. When the first sound came, it wasn't shouting or footsteps, it was a single drumbeat in the distance. Deep and slow. Sira's face paled. That's the law summons, she said. They're calling the clan to witness. They're going to take me by force. In front of everyone, Yarrick picked up the pistol, his jaw tightening. Then we make sure they regret showing up. The drumbeat grew louder. It rolled through the narrow streets like distant thunder. Each strike a warning. Yarrick stood at the window, watching the empty road. But he knew it wouldn't stay empty for long. Sira sat on the bench near the heater. She wasn't shaking anymore, but her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. Every beat of the drum was pulling her closer to the fate she had run from. They'll come from all sides, she said quietly. And they'll bring witnesses. They want the whole clan to see you fall. So no one will ever stand for me again. Yarrick didn't take his eyes off the road. They're about to find out I don't fall easy, he said. She looked at him. For a long moment, there was no bravado in his voice, only certainty. And for some reason, that steadiness made her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. The first figures appeared at the far end of the street. More came from the alleys, moving with deliberate slowness. They wanted to surround the house. Lanterns swayed in their hands, casting long, shifting shadows on the walls at their center. Walked the clan leader, tall and unhurried. The scarred man was beside him, his eyes fixed on the house like a predator watching its prey. Yarrick moved to the door. Sira, stay behind me. If they try to pull you out, you fight. You don't stop until you can't move. She nodded, gripping her staff. Her pulse was racing. but something about his voice made her believe she might survive this. The leader stopped a few paces from the doorway. The crowd behind him formed a wide circle, murmuring among themselves. "Human," the leader called out, "you've had your chance to make the smart choice. Now the law will speak." He raised his hand, and the scarred man stepped forward with two others. The moment they moved, Yarrick opened the door and stepped out. The crowd murmured louder. They hadn't expected him to face them head-on. "I'm not here to give her up," Yarrick said, his voice carrying clearly. "I'm here to tell you she's under my protection, whatever you think of her bloodline." "It means nothing to me." The leader's face stayed calm, but his eyes were cold. "You make a dangerous claim," he said. "In our law, claiming her means you are bound to her. Her enemies become your enemies. Her shame becomes yours. And her life is tied to yours until one of you dies." Yarrick didn't blink. "Then so be it," he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The leader's jaw tightened. "Then you've chosen death," he said flatly and gave the order. The scarred man rushed forward. Blade raised, Yarrick sidestepped. Grabbing his wrist and driving his knee into the man's ribs, the blade clattered. To the ground, another attacker lunged at him, but Sira moved like lightning, striking the side of the alien's knee with her staff. He went down hard. The fight turned chaotic. The crowd roared, some shouting for the clan, others watching in stunned silence. Yarrick fought with brutal efficiency, using his strength to throw attackers off balance. Sira fought beside him, each strike of her staff sharp and precise. It was as if she had been holding this part of herself back for years, now with someone worth fighting for. It had returned in full. The scarred man came at Yarrick again, fury twisting his face. This time, Yarrick caught him with a heavy punch to the jaw, sending him sprawling. The leader watched, his expression unreadable, when the last of the attackers were on the ground. Yarrick turned to face him, breathing hard. "Still think I can't keep her safe?" he asked. For a long moment, the leader said nothing. Then he raised his hand, and the remaining clan members stepped back. "You've made your choice, human," he said slowly. "And now it is binding. She is yours, by the law you've invoked. But know this, protection comes at a cost. The world will not forget what she is, and they will not forget what you've done." "I'm counting on it," Yarrick replied. The leader's gaze lingered on him, then on Sira, without another word. He turned and walked away. The rest of the clan, following the drumbeats, faded into the distance. The street was silent again. Yarrick closed the door behind them, leaning against it for a moment. Sira stood in the center of the room, her staff still in hand, her chest rising and falling quickly. "You just bound yourself to me," she said. Softly, "Yes," he said, "and I'm fine with that." For the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It wasn't a wide smile, but it reached her eyes. She set the staff aside and stepped closer. "You know, in my people's eyes. That means we share everything now. Shelter, food, even a bed," Yarrick chuckled faintly. "Then I guess we'd better get used to it," he said. She tilted her head, studying him. "I think I already am," she whispered. That night, the house was quiet. The barricades were still in place. But for the first time, the air inside felt warm. Sira lay beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Neither of them spoke, but both knew the truth. They had faced the clan together and won, and whatever came next, they would face it the same way, same bed, same fight, same life.